Welcome to WHI Reports, a community service of News Center 7. I'm Jim Otte. Thanks for joining us on this holiday weekend. And on the program today, we're going to talk about the local economy and a pair of projects that are moving the Miami Valley forward. A lot of people looking for jobs, and everybody's anxious to hear about economic development where those jobs would be created. Our guest is a specialist in the field involved in some pretty exciting work right here, trying to bring those jobs to the region. Chris Semarjian of the company called Industrial Commerce Limited. Welcome to the program. We're going to start with a little bit of video here. This is from a news conference recently talking about the General Motors plant. That was a very exciting day for you and for all of us. The GM plant in Moraine has sat there since 2008, empty. You saw it as a great opportunity. Let's start there.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. You know, we got into the facility about 4.2 million square feet that we observed. And stepping back, how we found the facility, we actually got a call from the city manager, Moraine, for us to come down and take a look at the facility. So we didn't find it on our own. A broker didn't bring it to us, like most of our projects. The city manager actually came out and found us. And we toured the facility, and its quality from day one really shined through. And that's what attracted us. Great location, a lot of civic pride in the community, and the quality of the structure.
The thing I would think that would be difficult from the start is it's so big. This is unlike many other factories around the Miami Valley. Right. You're talking 4 million plus square feet, but the location is good. You've got rail access to the interstate. It's all in one location, not scattered throughout some large campus. Right. You saw it and said, what? Your first reaction?
Quality. Pure quality. Most of these facilities over time become very old. There's a lot of functional obsolescence to these buildings. Not this facility. I don't know how much the community knows, but probably through the mid to late 90s, there were hundreds of millions of dollars poured into that facility in upgrades and 25-foot ceilings to 30-foot ceilings to even 40-foot ceiling heights. Most older industrial facilities are 16 and 18-foot clear, so it limits the industry that could actually go and occupy those facilities. So we saw flexibility.
So let's get a little bit of background about your company. You have a pretty long, successful track record here in Ohio of taking facilities like this that have had a long history, sitting empty or underused, and then making them successful again.
You're right. We've been very lucky in that respect. But I think our strength is really able to see a facility like this and figure out where the market's going and listen to our user base, because candidly, the users tell us what they need, and then we need to take the facility and get it to work around their use. And we've been very fortunate. Our Hoover project in North Canton has done extremely well, even in the down economy. We bought that in early '08. 1.4 million square feet in downtown North Canton. We've put 12 companies back in that facility, almost 900 jobs now, which was over what Hoover had the last several years there.
So when you start with a project like Moraine and GM, where do you begin? Our first really involvement was at the news conference, where you say, look, here's the developer, here are all the partners, we're going to go forward with this, and here is our vision for that. But there's got to be a lot of work prior to that, getting into it. Where do you begin in this process?
First, we do try to create a vision. It's one big block of space, and we try to show the market, the potential users, how that could be segregated. Because nobody really wants to step into 4.2 million square feet, even if they're a big user, and feel like they're a pioneer. So we have to show them that they could have freestanding or close to freestanding facilities. So we create the vision. The vision is probably not what will end up, but it provokes thought. And then we have to go get the user. It's all about the tenant user, and I don't want to be too repetitive, but once we find the user, we develop the building around their needs. And because we usually have a pretty low basis, it affords us the ability to go out and make the improvements necessary to attract that user and give them a good value.
In some of the news coverage early on here on News Center 7, or even at other stations or other media, people said, well, who's going to find a new use for this massive facility? Little did we know that really the greatest likelihood is it's not one user for the whole facility. It's going to be maybe a dozen or even more than that. Is that true? What is your vision for how that's going to lay out?
Yeah, depending on what happens. In Dayton, believe it or not, the Miami Valley, the I-75 corridor, has larger users than you think. We've had more large interest in this building than most of our projects further north in the state. So you could see a half dozen 200,000 to 300,000 square foot users. Our track record would tell us that you're probably dealing with users in the 50 to 150,000 square foot category, along with a complement of some 300, maybe even an 800,000 square foot user.
I started the program talking about jobs, and that's what people at home are most interested in.
Right.
How much potential, realistically speaking, especially in this economy, how much potential for job development does this hold, in your opinion?
It's huge. I mean, again, the quality of the building and the flexibility of the building and the location within the region is very, very strong. So we're very sensitive to over-promising on the job side. I would say, again, on the minimum, we'd be probably around 1,000 jobs, and we could push 2,000, and that's an average. If we get a big employer in there, it could go higher.
As you start to customize the property for those potential users, then you approach them and say, okay, what are you looking for? They say, I like a office space, or I like office space plus warehouse space. I like a variety of locations, loading docks, things like that. As you build that out, when might we start to see some of that? As we drive by, we look over and it looks the same as it has since December 2008 when it closed.
Right. Well, we actually had a showing this morning before the show, and candidly, it went pretty well. A big user, about 350,000 square feet. Don't know if it's going to happen yet, but they have a requirement within the next 12 months or so. We've shown the building for the last few months. We actually missed a transaction because we weren't ready, because we didn't close because of the whole situation with Motors liquidation and coming out of bankruptcy. So I think we'll secure our first tenant within the first 12 months.
And I wanted to ask about the timing, because this is a very complicated dance involving, it's like a big piece of machinery, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of moving parts all at once. Some of those parts move at different rates than others. You don't own the property yet, somebody else does. Where does that timetable stand as of right now?
Yeah, we were supposed to close within the last 2 weeks. The reason it hasn't closed because the property transferred from the Motors liquidation to the trust. Purely housekeeping issues on their side. I mean, you're not dealing with just a corporation who's selling an asset, so it moves more like government than it does the private sector. I would hope that it's closed within the next week, maybe 2 weeks latest, and we'll be prepared. We'll be clearing out the facility first, like we talked about in the press conference. That's the first part of business for us.
Yeah, how do you do that? You say, okay, look, we've got I was surprised at the time we were there for that announcement. There's a lot of equipment still there. Maybe not so much the machine and tooling and some of that, but the assembly line, there's still a lot of parts there.
Oh, yeah.
A lot overhead, a lot of wiring, a lot of machinery, a lot has to be cleared out.
Right.
Did you start at one end and move to the other? How does that work?
It's a great question. We look at the areas that we think are most saleable or would have the most impact on the market when we show it to a user. So in the assembly plant where we held the press conference, that final assembly that was finished in 2001, we'll go clear maybe half of that out. So when somebody walks in the front door, they can get a feel of how it's going to look open, clean, almost ready to go, a clean shell. We'll also go to the south side of the complex where the former paint building was, because that's loaded with equipment that you didn't see. And again, we need to clear that out so that when people walk in, they get the vision. First impression in our business is a lot.
Yeah, I would think that the facility being, it's an interesting combination of things. It's such a historic site. Everybody in the Miami Valley knows the GM Moraine site, but a lot of it really is relatively new. In industrial terms, almost brand new.
You hit it on the head. It's a great building, and we think that we'll be able to attract even more users. A lot of times, some of the major corporations don't want to go into an old auto factory, but because of the quality of the facility and the upgrades that are there and the flexibility, I think we'll appeal to companies that we might not typically appeal to.
I want to ask one more question about the economy, then we'll take a break.
Sure.
As we're coming out of the recession, I want to get your view. If anybody knows if the recession is over, it ought to be you, Chris. So it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, God.
Do you see it coming? We in our news stories keep saying the recession is beginning to lift.
Right.
And sometimes I wonder about that because we're not seeing those jobs coming quite yet. What do you see?
Well, barring some crazy double dip that we can't necessarily forecast, our business is up. And our business is up by the amount of showings, by the amount of leases we're concluding right now. But also the real estate industry has been on hold because the lender market wasn't there. And even in the last 60 to 90 days, the lenders have come out of the woodwork and want to start lending again. So I think we're out. In our business, we're out. There's still going to be issues, I'm sure. Maybe you don't see it on job growth, but one group that we just brought into our Hoover factory that's bringing 300 people there, they're bringing some operations in from China because they need quicker response. Putting their product on a boat and shipping it over with fuel costs right now are prohibitive. So I think you're going to see a little bit of that in the next year.
I told you we were going to have some good news in the program this morning. You're watching WHI Reports here on News Center 7. We're going to take a break right here, back with a few minutes with more with Chris. Stay with us.